State Circle is made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you.
Lawmakers begin a high-pressure election year session.
I'm of the opinion that we're here to resolve problems, not create them.
Governor's doing a great job, and the governor continues to do what he's doing.
Showdown votes on the issue of sick leave.
Working families across Maryland need earned sick days.
And should term limits apply to legislators?
Voters can vote us in or vote us out.
I think we need to have a robust conversation about how we revitalize our democracy.
Connecting Marylanders to their government. This is State Circle.
Good evening as we begin MPT's 37th year of providing complete weekly coverage of your legislature at work. I'm Jeff Salkin. This is State Circle. The 2018 General Assembly began this week. It's an election year, and that puts political acrimony on the agenda, as Charles Robinson reports.
When we start this legislative session, we're going to be on the attack. We're going to come after and protect the things that we believe in.
Firing up the party faithful is a time-honored tradition. Party leaders feed red meat to the Democratic Party faithful. But can it work?
I'm of the opinion that we're here to resolve problems, not create them.
During Governor Hogan's first year, there was a lot of talk of cooperation that some refer to as the Kumbaya moment. Failing to pass several of the governor's initiatives in later years led to accusations. Going into his fourth legislative session, Hogan knows the pitfalls are lurking.
This year, I'm concerned because I understand there's potentially an election coming up. I heard something about in November that politics might overshadow this legislative session. But I can assure you that's not what the people of Maryland want. It's not what we want.
The governor's agenda includes putting in place an inspector general to oversee school spending and a crackdown on repeat violent offenders. The legislative agenda includes a fix for new federal tax rules and continuing to fund children's health care insurance.
I've heard from some of the Democratic leaders concerns me, but today Speaker Bush and also the governor have both committed to working together. We got some really big issues.
The governor's very challenged. He's a Republican governor in a Democratic state which blew and getting bluer and bluer and bluer every day. And he reads the polls, sees the polls, and anything that is of a populist nature that he thinks he can spout off, even though he knows it probably won't pass, he reaches out for a microphone.
Governor's doing a great job, and the governor continues to do what he's doing. He's got a great legislative package that he's addressed over the last few days. And you know what? Those are the issues that really need to come up, and we need to have a good conversation about that. And if the Democrats want to play politics on that and not pass it, well, that's their problem, and that's something that they're going to be held accountable for.
So over the next 3 months, there will be fits and starts between the governor and the legislature. But at the end of this process, they have to have a budget and hopefully address issues that are pertinent to the voters. In Annapolis, I'm Charles Robinson for State Circle.
With the primary election 5 months away, a new poll looks at the race for governor. Gonzalez Research surveyed likely Democratic voters and found an edge for Prince George's County Executive Rashern Baker. With 1/3 undecided, the other candidates in double digits were Baltimore County Executive Kevin Kamenetz and former NAACP leader Ben Jealous. As for the governor, his popularity remains sky high with a total approval rating of 71%. When asked about hypothetical matchups with the leading Democrats, the race looked a bit tighter, with Hogan ahead by at least 10 points. Governor Hogan will be our newsmaker guest later in tonight's program. The recent wave of sexual misconduct cases involving figures in media and politics has lawmakers looking to strengthen protections for women at the State House. Here's Nancy Yamada.
It exists everywhere, especially in politics. Women are scared to come forward, and even legislators like me.
Senator Cheryl Kagan says the Me Too hashtag resonates with her as a female lawmaker.
I'm a very friendly and warm person. Strangers will walk up to me, though, and hug and kiss me and think that's okay. I'm fine with being touched on the shoulder or greeted with a friendly kiss on the cheek. There's some times where those boundaries are not respected.
We're not immune to it here.
Delegate Eric Barron says the policies need to be spelled out because some offenders may not even realize they're crossing the line.
Sometimes there's maybe a generational thing or cultural, but it doesn't make it right.
Obviously, we're in a political environment, and I think the fear is if you say, hey, I've been harassed, and then you report it, there's the fear of reprisals, because this is a very, people build their relationships on personal, interactions.
The head of the Legislative Women's Caucus says she's not so sure a commission is even needed, given that her group, comprised of both women and men, have been studying this issue for over a year, well before all of the scandals started rocking the nation.
I think we know what the best practices are. It's a matter of making recommendations and then choosing to adopt them as soon as possible.
Delegate Ariana Kelly says the group is still finalizing their recommendations, but under consideration.
Right here in the Maryland General Assembly, we don't have a policy like many outside employers do about whether you can have a romantic relationship with your direct employee or with an intern. Another thing that California and New York have done is established independent investigators so that you don't have members investigating their own colleagues when there's a sexual harassment complaint.
If someone engages in the behavior that's harassing someone, any kind of harassment really, we want to be sure someone has a clear line that they can report to, that it's independent, and so they don't feel like everyone's going to know what's going on.
At the same time,
you need to have an investigative process so that if someone's accused, there is a due process for them as well, because people certainly can be accused and not have done it.
Senate President Mike Miller says the panel should be comprised of only women to study how other states handle allegations of sexual harassment.
If we were to say some kind of commission, I can't think of one off the top of my head, where we said we're just going to put all men on this commission. It's ridiculous. It's an insult to men.
I think the advantage of the men being at the table is that they can hear firsthand and that they can learn more than maybe they would have if they weren't at the table. Everybody needs to be at the table for true change to happen.
I'm Nancy Yamada for State Circle.
Last year's battle over requiring companies to offer their employees paid sick leave turned into the first showdown vote of 2018. Supporters of last year's bill, which was vetoed by Governor Hogan, rallied in Annapolis. They say this is about fairness and healthy workplaces.
Working families across Maryland need earned sick days. It's a common sense policy. Parents like myself have, who have small kids, we deal with illnesses a lot. And, I'm lucky that I have sick days, but we know so many working parents don't.
Governor Hogan offered a competing measure with tax credits for some companies that extend paid sick leave to their workers. The House of Delegates was first to vote on overriding the veto. Debate fell along party lines in the House.
I urge my colleagues to come together, sustain the governor's veto. Let's work together on a fair and bipartisan leave policy.
Very, very respectfully, I say it's time to fold it, guys. We've had, over the course, this is the third year in a row that we've had this debate on the House floor.
The override vote was successful in both the House and the Senate. The new law takes effect in 30 days. The state is sending emergency funds to Baltimore City to repair school heating systems. Kids in dozens of schools huddled in parkas during the recent cold snap. 8 schools were closed for part of this week. The governor has proposed the hiring of an inspector general to look at how school funds are being spent statewide. This week, the governor proposed a 2-term limit for all legislators. He says it will enhance accountability following a series of corruption cases. Yolanda Vasquez has the latest from Annapolis.
Senator Nathaniel Oakes entered the State House on the first day of session and took his seat in a business-as-usual manner. The Baltimore City legislator was indicted on fraud charges last year and has confessed to taking bribes. Senate President Mike Miller will refer his case to an ethics committee, but says that might not be enough.
If the governor wants me to oust the senator, I don't have that authority. The people elected him. I can't oust anybody.
Governor Larry Hogan mentioned the charges against Oaks during his announcement of the Government Accountability Act of 2018. Citing a need to root out corruption, it would establish term limits on members of the General Assembly.
I think right now we have a term-limited system. Voters can vote us in or vote us out.
Senator Addie Eckert is a 24-year veteran legislator who is in favor of a 3-term limit versus 2, but posed an even bigger question.
Should there be term limits on leadership? That would be another interesting debate. How long should a person be in leadership before you need to change it up?
I think people here that have been here for a good period of time don't want to leave.
For me, respectfully, term limits are already in place. We have a term limiting procedure this year, 2018. It's an election year.
Senator Richard Madaleno says Hogan's proposal is merely a diversion tactic. He'd rather talk about ways to engage voters.
I think we need to have a robust conversation about how we revitalize our democracy.
Term limits already exist in 15 states, including Montgomery County. Senator Cheryl Kagan opposed it in her jurisdiction and will do the same on the state level.
There's too much churn. You lose the legislative history and the expertise, and you get a lot of young people who are, not young is a problem, but new. They don't even know how things work yet, and they're already committee chairs. So I don't think that's in the interest of our state.
Many of the senators I spoke to say it's highly unlikely the bill will pass. But even without term limits, at least 1/2 to 1/3 of Senate Democrats won't be back next year.
Whether that's they are retiring, they are running for another office, they lose in the primary, or they lose in the general. There will be a lot of new ideas and new leadership. The next generation is ready to step in, and it'll be very exciting.
As calls grow for Oaks to resign, many wonder if he will be expelled, like former state senator Larry Young. With his fate hanging in the balance, Oaks seems resolute to continue his 30th legislative session. In Annapolis, I'm Yolanda Vasquez for State Circle.
Senator Oaks was in court this week fighting the charges. A group of legislators wasted no time in putting forth a clean energy expansion bill this week. They'd like to double the renewable energy goal to 50% and called for investments in training for clean energy jobs.
I think it's ambitious, but I think we can't really sit around for another 4 or 5 years while these things are happening on Capitol Hill, impacting this region. And I think this is important to get this on the table this session and not 3 or 5, 10 years from now.
Environmentalists say there is great potential to harness the wind and solar power in our region. While the environment right outside the State House has suffered a setback, some of the trees along State Circle are now tree stumps. They were cut down for emergency utility work. The beautiful flowering crabapple trees will be replanted in the spring. Up next, our interview with Governor Hogan. We'll be right back.
Got an unused vehicle going nowhere? Donate it to the one place that can take you any place. Visit mpt.org/vehicles and support the programs you love on MPT.
The MPT app puts our programs right at your fingertips, so you can choose when to watch, what to watch, wherever you want to watch it. Download it now.
What happens in Japan and Asia matters to me. With NHK World's newsroom in Tokyo, I get the news live from Japan right at the start of my day.
New ideas come out of Asia all the time. NHK Newsline reports on business, technology, and world events from Tokyo to Bangkok.
Once in the morning gives me a heads up on the competition.
Every hour on the hour, the news I want from Asia.
Watch NHK World now on Comcast Channel 268 and Verizon Channel 480.
Our newsmaker this week is the governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan. Governor, thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you, Jeff. It's great to be with you.
Let's start with your reaction to the veto override vote in the Senate today on the issue of sick leave.
Well, it really was simply a political move by the legislature. It didn't mean much of anything. The reality is that I agree with the legislature that we need to provide sick leave, paid sick leave, to more people in Maryland. and that there were really serious problems with this flawed bill. They understand that. They're going to rewrite the bill, fix the bill, and hopefully include all of the concerns and have them addressed. But this, they could have done that without the veto override. It really doesn't have much bearing at all. This law, as currently written, will not stand with or without this vote, and we are going to pass a really good sick leave bill that will be amended.
Let's spend a minute on the impact of the new federal tax law, which is obviously a very big deal and probably not that well understood yet. Studies are underway in terms of what the effect of that is going to be on the state of Maryland and the state budget. What do you understand that to be?
Well, we're waiting for Comptroller Francho. His office is charged with, they're the tax collectors. They're charged with doing a study to kind of do an analysis of exactly what this bill is and isn't going to do and who it's going to impact with respect to taxes, federal taxes, state taxes. Are they going up? Are they going down? The general overview that we've gotten so far, it looks as if most people in Maryland will see their federal taxes go down. The total amount will be somewhere close to $1.5 billion. However, because Maryland has been a fairly high tax state and many of these deductions are tied to those state taxes, that if we don't do something, Maryland taxes people will see somewhere between potentially $500 million and $1 billion of increased taxes at the state level. So the presiding officers and many of the fiscal leaders in the legislature called on me to say, Governor, we need you to help protect Maryland taxpayers who may be negatively impacted by this federal bill, and I promise that is exactly what we're going to try to do.
Now, ordinarily, you would not want to try to rewrite the state tax code in an election year, but that sounds like it's what you're going to have to try to do.
Well, we're going to have to fix some of the issues that the current federal law kind of imposes on the state. Otherwise, some fairly bad things may happen to the state. So we're hopeful we can find common ground and get something done to protect taxpayers.
I think next week is when you have to introduce the budget bill. What's that going to look like this year?
Well, it's going to look a lot like our budgets in the past. We are going to control the rate of spending growth. We're going to fund our priorities. We'll be the fourth year in a row with record funding for education, K through 12 education. We're going to go way and above and beyond the funding formulas that are set by the legislature. We're going to put more money into the schools. We're protecting all of the school systems that have declining enrollments, where the mandated formulas would make them get less money. We're making sure that doesn't happen. And every single school system in the state will receive more money. All of our agencies will be funded well. While not everyone's going to be happy, this is just a starting point. We submit a draft budget, and over the next 90 days, we get to see what the legislature's priorities are and what changes they want to make.
Some of the members of leadership in the legislature are talking about a lockbox, they call it, for casino revenue. And there's this flood of casino money. I think it was $140 million just last month coming into the state. And they want to dedicate that to education. Your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great idea. I believe we're going to submit legislation to accomplish just that. You don't need to put this on the ballot for a referendum. We can do it by statute. But yes, there was a poorly written bill in the first place by the legislature, signed into law by the previous governor, and we think it should be fixed. We agree with them. Education's been our #1 priority. We do have a lot of revenues coming in from the casinos and the slots, and we should dedicate that money to education.
Speaking of education, it sounds like things are getting a little bit better in Baltimore City when it comes to the heat in the city schools there. Do we have a better handle on what happened? Was the problem obsolete equipment? Was it bad maintenance? Was it bad luck? What went into that?
It's probably a whole host of things that caused the problem, but the #1 issue is lack of accountability, incompetence, and failure to take actions in advance to make sure these kinds of things don't happen. The problems with the heating and air conditioning in the schools in Baltimore City and Baltimore County has been something that the Comptroller, Peter Francho, and I, on a bipartisan basis, have been raising the flag and sounding the alarm bell on for 3 years. The people in the city and in the county refused to take it seriously, and now we ended up in a crisis. I was complimentary on the mayor who jumped in there herself with her team to help get these things fixed when the school board in Baltimore City failed to do so. And I appropriated emergency funding, $2.5 million, to try to get that fixed. But when you think about the fact that, Baltimore City is the 4th highest funded school system in America, that they can't get operating heat and air conditioning systems, it's just outrageous. It's one of the reasons why we're pushing for one of our pieces of legislation is to provide more accountability. The state puts $6 billion into local school systems to provide for education, and yet we have no control whatsoever of whether that money's being wasted or what's actually happening in those school systems.
Well, the state just gave up some control in I think, giving the mayor the ability to fully appoint the school board. Do you regret that change?
No, not at all. I supported the mayor in trying to get control of it. The issue is in most places that the school systems are completely autonomous and they don't report to the local or the state government. And they're not that accountable to the taxpayers. So the fact that the mayor showed just this past weekend that her getting involved personally and having more control over the schools is a good thing. But they haven't really gotten control of it yet. But there's allegations of wrongdoing in a number of school systems around the state. And one of the things we proposed was a new IG, Investigator General, for the Board of Education, try to look into some of these issues and make sure that we're holding them accountable to the taxpayers.
While we have you, let me run through a couple other issues. We're working on a special program next month on the opioid crisis. 2017 was another tough year in terms of opioid overdoses in Maryland. We've tried a lot of things. Is there anything we need to do differently to address that?
Well, look, this is probably the #1 crisis, not only facing Maryland, but every state in the nation. It's one of the biggest problems that our federal government needs to address. I've been leading the nation on this issue. I've been talking about this opioid crisis for 4 years, a year before I became governor, talking about it. The first thing I did after being elected was put together an opioid and heroin emergency task force that was chaired by the lieutenant governor. We came up with 28 recommendations, and we enacted all of them. Couldn't slow the problem down. It keeps evolving. We became the first state in the nation to declare a real state of emergency and stand up our Maryland Emergency Management Agency to coordinate between state agencies and local governments to try to get our handle on this. We have invested $500 million in the fight against opioids and heroin and addiction problems in the state. Now, there's some small, pieces of positive news, although it's still a terrible crisis. The abuse of prescription drugs has tapered off slightly. It's on the downward slope. Heroin usage is actually down for the first time ever. But the use of synthetic fentanyl and carfentanil, which are sometimes 50 to 100 times more dangerous and more powerful, that's up 70%. So as we get our hands around one part of this problem, it just shifts to something else. And as the problem, the crisis changes, so must our response to it. We have a number of other opioid bills that I believe we'll be announcing next week to try to continue to go after it. But this is going to take education, intervention, treatment, and crime measures to try to get these people dealing in these drugs off our streets. We've got tougher mandatory sentences for people who commit crimes with a gun. We've got RICO statutes to try to take down entire criminal gang enterprises. We've doubled the number of treatment beds, and we've invested more money than probably any other state in America. We're going to keep focused on it. But 2,000 Marylanders lost their lives last year, and it's a crisis.
One of the things the federal tax bill did was remove effectively the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act mandate that everybody have health insurance. There's talk about whether Maryland should have its own mandate to try to shore up the two insurers left in that market. Would you agree with that?
Well, let me just say that I've been, again, leading the charge on this entire health care issue. As you know, I oppose both the House bill and the Senate bill. I've been protecting the dollars that we're getting in state, protecting the additional people who were covered. On Medicare, just last week, we received an extension of the Medicare all-payer waiver that we have in Maryland. We're the only state in the country that has one. It's going to mean a couple $2 billion to our state, and it's going to help protect hundreds of thousands of people. We were we're against the changes. Look, I've tried to bring Republicans and Democrats together and say the Democrats don't want to change a thing about the affordable health care plan. Some Republicans just want to throw it out without a plan. We've got to fix these issues. We want to keep the people covered who have gotten coverage through this plan without having the doubling of premiums, which we've seen on too many hardworking Marylanders. With respect to the mandates, it's really a tax or a penalty they were forcing on people. And I said to them, look, we want to solve the problem. Try to address the problem here in Maryland that Washington failed to fix. But we have to look at this in context of this other potential windfall of revenue as well from the federal changes in the tax law. I don't want to be hammering lower income and middle class taxpayers multiple times because of stupid things they've done in Washington. But we're willing to sit down and talk with the legislature. I have not seen their proposal, but we together will figure out a way to get this done. I believe that some of this we will be able to get fixed in Washington. We're fighting for CHIP funding, the Children's Health Insurance Program. I think we'll keep that protected in Washington, but if not, we'll come together with the legislature and we'll figure out what to do before this 90-day session is over with.
Governor Larry Hogan, thank you for fitting us into your schedule today.
Thank you, Jeff. It's a pleasure.
And that is our program for this week. Tune in every week at this time as we bring the State House to your house. You can also connect with State Circle online. Streaming videos of our programs can be found at video.mpt.tv. That's video.mpt.tv. Please follow us on Twitter. The Twitter address is @MPTNews. Monday on Direct Connection, we are #1 in bed bugs. So says a new report. We will find out how to protect your home. That's live with your phone calls and tweets Monday at 7 o'clock. Now, for all of us at MPT, I'm Jeff Salkin. Thanks for watching and have a good night.
This program was made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities.